Friday Night Firelight presented by Mortal Up. I'm Brian Brawdy, your host, broadcasting with Telestream's Wirecast and sponsored by Nutrient Survival at nutrientsurvival.com and of course Firebugs at Firebugs, that's BUGGZ.com. I'm singing in the rain, just singing it. Oh, hi, hey, welcome to Friday Night Firelight. It's a little windy, a little rainy. Trying my best to cover the microphones, the camera. You get all the rest of that. You know what's going on. But hey, I wanted you to know that for the duration of the night show, I'm identifying as a performer neutral. So I might just bust into a song. I'm having this Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers singing in the rain flashback. So I identify as a singer. Oh, and because I'm performer neutral, you don't know. I would say you're not certain, but I could very well identify as a dancer. Get up, cut the rug, bust a move. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to, right? This isn't a music video. It's not a dance video. I can't do either one. But what I can do is give a quick shout out and a thankfulness or a quote of thankfulness to my sponsors. So let me start with Nutrient Survival. Now, why I love Nutrient Survival, it's very, very simple. It's great food for emergencies. It's great food for every day. It's food for your mind and your body. But here's what I noticed. Let me just share this with you quickly. Here's what I noticed about what's going on with me, right? I've said before, never settle, never surrender, Nutrient Survival. But here's what I realized. What it means is never stress. That's what the NS should stand for. It's never stress. Because no matter what the future holds, I know myself, my family, my wife, my kids, we don't have to worry about food. I know that no matter what happens, a little bit of lightning there, I think, no matter what happens, they've got my back. They're watching out for me. So all the stress of come what may, I know we've got great nutrient-dense food that'll see us through whatever it is that fate throws at us. So my new tagline is, what's it going to be? Never surrender, never stress, Nutrient Survival. And of course, our good friends at Firebugs and the Firebugs Fun Pit, the propane pit. We have the wood pit down the way, which is it's underwater given all the rain we've had. It's just a mud hole, but I love burning firewood in there. And of course, what I call Firebugs on the Fly, my little set that allows me to hit and go just about anywhere that I want. So I wanted to thank them. And of course, as well, Telestream's Wirecast wouldn't be coming to you if it weren't for Wirecast. All right, so here's what we do. We've been talking about this week about invasive species. I know you're thinking, wow, really, invasive species? Yeah, like Asian carp. You see them jumping all over the place. Or gypsy moths. I'm told that's a pretty prolific invasive species. You got the Burmese python, if you've ever been to the Everglades. I love them down there, South Florida. They're apparently started years ago, with just 2, they think, got released into the woods. Some exotic pet thought they were gonna be a bigger man, bigger woman on campus. Don't want to be sexist. Bigger man, bigger woman, right? Just because you, again, as performer neutral, you never can tell which way, right? So don't want to be sexist. But they decided, ooh, this snake, this will make me look really good. And then when it got to be the size of a small house, they let it loose in the wild. And the thing carries like 1,000 eggs in every little hatch. So they're going crazy with Burmese pythons. But that's not the most invasive species. And you think, what else is it? Zebra mussels. Good one, right? No. You don't spell it that way, but right? Well, I guess you could. Zebra mussels is one. And then the kudzu vines. If you've ever driven, especially alongside of the road, any of the roadways or the highways in the South, kudzu vines. They're just growing everywhere. And how could you forget about our friend, the feral swine? Millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property damage because these feral swine in and around Texas and some of the more southwest and into the South, they're just tremendously damaging invasive species. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, if I could do a drum roll, I would. What is the most invasive species? And you know what it is? The most invasive species, not Asian carp, not gypsy moths, not Burmese pythons, not the zebra mussels, the kudzu vines, or the feral swine. The most invasive species, and you hear tell about it all over today, especially if you watch the news. I don't know why anyone would watch the news, but if you're watching the news, you'd be like, Brian, what the heck are you talking about? Well, that's what I'm talking about. The most invasive species does the most damage every year in our country. And that invasive species is fear. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Bri, I've been told all along that fear is like a natural emotion. And I'm here to tell you, no, it isn't. No, hear me out of this. I'm here to say very simply that fear is an invasive species. Now, you can be aware of what's going on around you. I call it neurosavvy, right? You can be aware of your six. You can be aware of your immediate surroundings. You can be aware of your adjacent possible. And you're paying attention. But that makes you aware. It doesn't make you fearful, right? And there's a reason they call it fight, flight, or freeze. You don't hear fear is in one of them, right? It's an emotional regulation system that says, hey, you better pay attention to this, you better square your shoulders and take care with it, or you better run, or you're gonna freeze if that's what you're gonna do. But fear is not. Everyone says, well, of course I'm afraid, it's a natural emotion. I would ignore them. Fear is the most invasive species. And what we also find in reading any of the periodicals now, what we also find is that your physical body, not to mention your mind, but let's say you think, oh, I could only do a single pull-up. I'll bet you at the end of the hour you could get 10 push-ups, sit-ups, squat thrusts, go out for a long walk, whatever it is. Doctors now, neuroscientists, physiologists, if they're worth anything at all, will tell you that your mind quits on you long before your body ever does. And they've taken all kinds of athletes from all over the world, and they do muscle biopsies while their athletic prowess is being displayed, and what they find is they tapped out, oh, I couldn't go another step. They go, well, that's not your muscle. Your muscles absolutely, boy, it gets nice and warm under this umbrella, I tell you that. Thank you, firebugs. What happens is your mind taps out long before your body does. Your muscles, your lungs, your heart, everything that you need to be a badass, it's ready to go. We may be used just a little percentage. But then our brain goes, you're going to do some damage. You better stop. All this is tougher than we think. Blah, 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 blah. And what happens is we end up caving. We don't pay attention to anything other than that little voice in the back of our heads going, I don't know, you better watch out for this. Got to make my berry drink from Nutrient Survival. You got to watch out for this. This could be tough. You don't want to mess with this. Well, physiologists are saying you might be tapping out because mentally you're talking yourself into tap out. And I think of all the oh man, that smells, I wish you could smell this. I wish this were a sniff cast. You could smell how great the stuff is from Nutrient Survival. And taste too, if I went, you know what, drop me a line, send me a tweet or a Facebook or whatever it is, and I'll make sure you get some of this. You're going to love the taste of this, and it especially warms you up on a cold, rainy night like tonight. So what the physiologists are now saying is that fear, I think it was Mark Twain said, fear is false expectations appearing real. That's a pretty good acronym. But what the doctors are telling us now is our minds convince us that it's something to be afraid of long before our body is upset by whatever it is that we're doing. And I think if you would stop and take a look at it for just a moment, you'd go, you're a lot smarter, you're a lot faster, you're a lot stronger, you're a lot tougher, you're not fragile, you're not timid, you're not fearful, you're not weak. Study anything about the way the human body has progressed over the years, none of us would be here. None of us would be here tonight to watch this if we were as fragile, if we were as breakable, if we were as malleable as all the powers that be. Big government, right? I call it the bureaucratic behemoth, the legislative leviathan, I think I said the other day, right? Big government, big pharma, big food, big tech, big whatever. We're not nearly as timid and as fearful as they want us to be. But I think, and you know my position on it, I think what happens to us is we go, hey, look, I don't want to be a bad guy. I'm not the guy that's trying to be mean to folks. I'm not this and that. So we go, don't rock the boat. You might as well just give in. Oh, I don't want to cause any waves. I don't want to be that guy or that girl. I don't want to be that person. But that's your mind talking your body out of it knowing what it's ultimately capable of. So when I talk about mortal up, it's about it's about digging deep. So what challenges? What obstacles? You know, I believe your obstacles are your oracles. What oracles are presenting themselves to you just so you can rise to the challenge at hand? Just so you can eclipse whatever the emergency is. And I think you're a good bit tougher than you remember. Now, you're busy reading all the headlines. Oh, you're fragile. Oh, you're this or that. But maybe we're not. They want us to be because we're easier to cudgel. We're easier to corral. We're easier to convince. We're easier to be gaslit. When you think about it, it really does boil down to being gaslit. We're easier at being gaslit if we're all those things, if we believe those things, if we start drinking their Kool-Aid. It's easier for them to control us. Well, I'm here to say, mortal up, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Because the only critic that ultimately matters, I think, is your own mirror. Now people say, oh, I got a pretty critical voice. Great, then you stand at your mirror long enough for the mirror to not check in your look, not go, oh, look at me. Because that's when the critical voice comes. But the critical voice doesn't want to debate. It doesn't want to mix it up with you. So the key is to stand in the mirror long enough for the mirror to stare back at you. And you're a good bit more resilient. You're a good bit tougher. Yes, there's invasive species, fear being one of them, that little voice being another, doubt being one. You doubt your ultimate resilience. But I'll tell you, the situation you and I are in, it's going to depend on whether we mortal up or not, whether we out-brutal the brutal or not. You look at the governments, you look at the not just our government, governments all over. You look at drugs, you look at the pharmaceutical company, or even other illegal drugs. You look at the foods that we have to eat, all the different things that you and I are up against. But the great news is we can beat it back when we remember ultimately who we are. And that's the thing about mortal up. Well, I joked in the beginning about what I'm going to self-identify as. I'm self-identifying as a singer or a dancer, right? I was even going to do a little thing where I was going to bring a little piece of rug and then cut it with some scissors. I'm going to cut the rug. But what if you and I were to identify as the true mortals that we are? And I think what happens in the debate between human being, you're thankful to be here, you're grateful to be here. The difference between human being and human getting is that you're constantly looking for something else, looking. But what if you already have everything you've ever needed? What if there wasn't a challenge that you couldn't square your shoulders with, confront, and defeat? If you only believed in your ability to do so. This isn't motivation, it isn't inspiration. We're just talking the science of it here. We're talking about your ability to bring the brutal whenever you're confronted by brutal. And I mean that physically, and I mean it psychologically. Now, I know I get in trouble, and over on a social media site this week, a therapist picked a fight with me and says, well, you know, it's a good bit more than your 20 minutes in the morning going for a walk in the nature. And I said to him on this public platform, no, it isn't. You're a charlatan. Countless studies have shown that if we're depressed, if we're upset, if we're any of these other things, that getting up in the morning, going for a walk, using the body, using your lungs, breathe like you mean it. If you get up, start your morning in the sunlight, 20 minutes a day, you get up and that becomes your morning ritual. You get up, you get out, throw on some clothes if it's cold, if it's not, go out in a pair of shorts or whatever. Get some sunlight in your eyes, right? Get some wind in your face. Get your body moving, then it's better than any drug. That our ability to use the human body the way it was intended absolutely being ignored of late. But if you do that, if you put your body through its paces, mentally and physically, it's going to cure a good bit of things. Now, I know why the therapists pick a fight with me, because they want you to come in and, please, we had the couch upholstered. Please come in, sit down, tell me, oh, geez, yes. You are a wounded inner child. I'd like to take you back to that time. Well, what if we didn't go back? What if we just said, you know what, the hell with it. Starting right now, starting today, I'm going to realize what I'm ultimately capable of. We all have baggage, right? We're all a Sherpa to a certain degree of carrying the things around that came in our childhood. But instead of focusing on the childhood, because what does that do? That guarantees that you pay the therapist, you help them pay their college tuition. But what if your therapist was the sunrise? What if your therapist was a walk in the morning? What if your therapist was using your other senses the way it was intended? Breathe like you mean it, see like you hear it, smell like you mean it. What if you put all your senses through their paces? What would happen to you? I don't know. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. But I would offer that the invasive species of fear, of self-doubt, of drinking the Kool-Aid of the very people that are attempting to control you. That's not what the human body, that's not what your body was designed for. It's not at all in the cards for you. Think about it. I don't know, for some reason my mind always goes to Lewis and Clark, or you go back even further than that. You know, there was a big report out in neuroscience journals this week that says, oh, you know, sometimes going to a stadium and rooting for a sports team is great for your mental health. Yeah, but also it would have been going to the Coliseum and rooting for your favorite gladiator would have been great for your mental health. It's not that you're going and rooting for a sports team. They go, well, it really helps against you being lonely. No, the concept of being lonely is what troubles you in the first place. I think when you go to a sporting event, I think when you go out to the Coliseum, as I said earlier, you're connected. You know that you are the personification, the personal fingerprint of flow itself. And I think flow was a primeval force. I think Big Bang, Big Breath, Garden of Eden, exploding cosmic fireball, you decide. But from the very beginning, that primeval force of flow was there, waiting for you to rise to the challenge. Maybe it throws challenges at you and me just to see if we're up for them. Challenges don't have to defeat us until we tap out, until we surrender. The report goes on to say, well, when you're in a crowd full of people, you don't feel lonely. Exactly. Not because the individual eye is worth other individual eyes. Oh, I don't feel lonely. Oh, really? Well, okay, Muffin, good for you. No, that's not it at all. It's a physiological memory of your connection to the field itself. Either the holy, H-O-L-Y, or holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, right? Science or religion. It's your connection to the field itself. That's what you feel when you're at these sporting events. But therapists, not all, but a good number of the mental health practitioners that are out there to help you, they need you to believe that it's outside of you to chart your own course, because that's how they pay their electric. That's how they pay their cable. That's why they get to go over and buy their new electronic on a Friday afternoon before they head out to happy hour to spend your money, simply because you won't get up and go for a walk in the morning. Now, are there times to see a doctor? Sure. There's also times to get up and go for a walk. Put your mind and the body through the paces, and you'll be absolutely amazed at what your physiology, at what your immune system, at what all those other things do for you if you would just do for them, if you would just use them. What's the old, I think it was, I forget the guy who came up with it, something about iron rusts when you don't use it properly. I think it was Da Vinci, right? Use it or lose it is another term. Well, what if our very ability to rise at whatever the brainiacs, right? Big brainiacs, everybody's smarter, everybody knows. What if the very thing we need to be able to draw our line in the sand and stand up for ourselves is to draw the line in the sand and stand up for ourselves. And all the studying, everything, and I've mentioned it not too long ago, but for years, I've been reading a couple books a week. And with the advent of Kindle and Audible, I either read or listen to them. But I've been hammering it pretty much 2 books a week for almost 40 years now, since my father's suicide. And I've yet to read a book that has convinced me that your best self is outside of your personal understanding of who you are. And that when you start there, when you throw that clay on the potter's wheel, real human potential, real human resilience, when you mortal up, square your shoulders, and realize that your obstacles are your oracles, right? That you accept your fate and go, is that all you brought? I think when you do that, not only does the universe dovetail, I think more importantly, up front, your body dovetails. Every part of your body goes, man, she gets it. She's out there. She's hitting it this morning. She's getting the sunlight in her eyes. She's breathing. He's humping with a ruck, doing whatever your physical exercise is. I think when you put your body through the paces, it repays you in kind. And that's the message I think I'd like to leave here with today for Friday Night Firelights is remember who you really are. And all mortal up means, of course, you and I believe in progressive adaptation. A muscle wouldn't work if it wasn't for an antagonist muscle. The heart wouldn't pump if there wasn't an antagonist chamber. Your lungs wouldn't work. Inhale wouldn't matter if there wasn't an exhale. Of course it's a tug of war. Of course it's a chess match. But that's what life itself is. And I got to think that if we were nearly as timid as everyone wants to convince us that we are, our family tree never would have made it here. It'd have been like brush shrub. It'd be like some lichen growing in a rock. We wouldn't have had any kind of family tree at all because we'd have been triggered, we'd have caved, we'd have bowed, kowtowed. I get in trouble now for social appropriation, right? What is that? No, it's not social appropriation. What's the word I'm looking for? You know what I mean. Cultural appropriation. Thank you very much. Cultural appropriation. If we'd have kowtowed way back then, we wouldn't have made it here today. So you have in your genealogy some pretty knockdown, drag-out stuff that's just begging for you to mix it up in the knockdown, drag-out. And it's coming if it's not already here with everything we have going on in the world today. But I'm here to suggest that you remember who you ultimately are. Not, right. Maybe not so much what you've begun to believe because you've just been hammered like a speed bag. No. Oh, you need this, you need that, you need this, you're getting. Oh, make sure you get more this, more this, more this. Then you'll finally feel happy. So I'm not a big fan of setting goals. Always. Carl Sandburg. Hope is an echo. It bids you yonder, yonder, yonder. Well, what about right here, right now? What would you do if you knew? What's the question I hear all the time? What would you do if you knew you could not fail? So the most invasive species of all is fear. Maybe for the other people that want to go, oh, Brad, I don't know. Let's put it this way. Capital F, fear. All right? If you want to believe that fight or flight or freeze is triggered by little f, small f fear, I'll meet you halfway. I don't think that's the case. I think that what we have is an awareness of our surroundings, that with our face buried in our phones, our face on TVs, are worried about likes and upvotes and all these other things. We've forgotten what it's like to pay attention to everything going on around us. So I think it's more acuity than it is believing that fear is a natural emotion. But when you rise to the challenge at hand, you talk about progressive adaptation, rising to the challenge at hand makes you not only stronger, right? It makes you braver. It's like, hey, wait a minute, what the heck was I scared of? What is going on here? I was terrified. I was petrified. I can't believe I couldn't even think. But I did come out on top of that scenario, so maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Maybe, hey, I think the rain is slowing down here a little bit. What if it weren't as bad after all. And you look back and go, man, I crushed it. Yeah, Brian was right. The fear, false expectation appearing real. Again, to quote Mark Twain, don't want to plagiarize. All right, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Thank you so very much for spending. Don't forget, take a look at the flames. See what the flames have in store for you. Thank you so very much for joining me for another version of Friday Night Firelight. Next week, I'd like to talk a little more next week about some of this, and I got some pushback on social media because I said DEI, this diversity, equity, and inclusion. I call them IEDs, like improvised explosive devices, right? Because they're just trying to tank the future for our kids. So maybe next week we can focus a little more on that. But for tonight, just remember who you ultimately are. Mortal up. There isn't a challenge out there that can crush you without your permission. All right, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Thank you so very much. Wayne, if you would, cue the close.